Well, since I have just a few minutes, I want you to know that this is a presentation that I developed working with students over the last 10 years, thinking about all of my experiences in running companies, and it's condensed from about 3 hours to 30 minutes, so I have a lot of work to do. So we're going to get started right away here, if I can get it to click. Okay. So one of the first principles about running anything is you have to know who's in charge. You can't run corporations or organizations, I call it a three-chair barbershop. You can't run companies by committee. I have a great video that I would show, but I don't have time. This is just really important to say you must know who's running the organization. Everybody needs to know who's running the organization, and there needs to be clarity in the leadership role. So one of the things that's unique about leadership in a startup is that you have to be a different kind of leader at various stages of the startup. For example, the very first type of leadership that you're exhibiting inside of a company is project leadership, because you don't have a company. You're trying to develop a product. You're trying to find an early team, and everyone is working on projects. And so you're trying to go from an idea to a real paying customer, because an idea isn't worth anything, but when somebody demonstrates that they're willing to pay, then you know that you've got something and you can get started. The next thing is operational validation. So this means that I'm going to now take my company from a paying customer to being able to, the functions of, I can actually set up selling systems and marketing systems, and I'm beginning to build the interior of my company. And this takes a unique type of leader also that's willing to pay attention to the details, to keep projects on task, but also that's inspiring the beginning vision of this company. And we're going to talk about vision as a really important tool for building your company. The next thing is financial validation. So at this stage of company building, I'm going to bring in my repeatable best practices and processes so that the company can begin to function at a level that where if I repeat any function in the company over and over and over and over again, then I need to standardize whatever that is to find the best process. For example, when I go into companies today, one of the things that I'm looking for is mapping out how they function, how they operate, and then I'm looking for duplication, and I'm trying to make it as efficient and tight as possible. So this takes a different kind of leader. And finally, you get this inspiring leader where we have sustainability. They're running a large corporation. A lot of times you'll find entrepreneurs having a hard time making this leap when they can build a $1 million organization, they can build a $10 million organization, but if it goes to 30, 40, or 50, sometimes it outstrips their capabilities, and they bring in seasoned CEOs at that particular point. But if you're interested in running your company for the long term, then you have a lot of education that you have to acquire over time, and study of leadership and study of organizations and so forth. So one of the things that's helpful is to break down the parts and pieces. I like to think of basketball as an example. So for example, in basketball, I've got to have a good shot, right? And I've got to be able to shoot free throws. And I've got to be able to pass. And I've got to be able to rebound and play defense. I've got to be in incredible physical condition. I've got to know the game inside and out. I've got to know all the nuances. And if I put all that together into one, person, then I've got a great, I'm going to be a good basketball player. I like to say that if I have all those things put together, then I'm LeBron James, and if I'm missing one or two, then I might be Jimmer. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just that, you can, if you're a little too slow or your defense isn't where it needs to be, and I don't know, I don't know all of the ins and outs there. I know that he's a great player. But you see how hard it is to get to the upper echelons of the NBA. The same is true of how hard it is to get to the upper echelons of running companies. So In business, instead of it being that great shot, it's general administration and the skills that take place there. So if you think about the touch points that are taking place inside of a company, I used to script my receptionist so that they would answer the phone the right way, they would answer it by the second ring, and all kinds of different things to make sure that there was great customer care there. And then operationally, we don't want it to be completely sound. And then we wanted to make sure that we had a fantastic sales and marketing engine, a finance engine, and technology, research and development. All of those things had to take place, and when you put all of those together, then you've got a great business. So, for example, if you take one certain kind of business, which is very innovative, and they do things that other companies don't do. So we call that blue ocean as opposed to red ocean. A lot of competitors, a lot of sharks in the ocean going for the same fish supply, whereas if you're in blue ocean, you're the only fish in the ocean, you get all the food to yourself. So the idea here, when I was running one of my companies, we took a mundane sort of business and built it into a large business, multi-state business. And we didn't do it because we were the most innovative. We took every one of these parts and pieces that are listed here, and we looked at each one of them individually, just like I could replicate, thousands of jumpers or free throws or learning how to pass. If you watched the game with the Jazz last night, then you saw lots of passing that is like, wow, there's some skill there. And so this is what we're doing here. And so one of the engines that was so strong in this particular company was sales. And whenever people would look at one of our sales representatives, they'd say, wow, that if I had to grade that on a scale of 1 to 10, that would be a 9 or a 10. But looking over here, I can see that my competitors are at a 4 or 5. And when there's that big of a difference, then the selling process gets a lot easier. So one of the things that helps in leadership is that you understand the data. So I've got a picture of a cockpit here. I'm not a pilot, but I have a son-in-law that's a pilot, and I've been in dozens and dozens of cockpits, and they are very sophisticated when you look at all those instruments. And you've got instruments that help you to fly through fog, and you've got instruments that allow you to know how high you are in the air, all the different things that you need to know. In companies, data is king. And if you don't know the data and you don't manage by the data, then you will falter. So I'm going to show you a principle here of how to think about that. So data-driven leadership. So first of all, we have KPIs, key performance indicators. Every company has to go through the process of identifying what their key performance indicators are. You would think that that's an easy process, but I'm telling you it's not. Some of the key indicators are simple to come up with. Others take a lot of thought, and then you put in your benchmarks, and they're either green, or they're yellow, or they're red. And if they're in the green, you know everything's go. If they're in yellow, then you act immediately. If they're in red, you're in trouble if you don't fix it. So when we get buy-in from our associates about what these KPIs are, then everybody's on the same page and they are driven to succeed and to accomplish those KPIs. One of my favorite statements is saying that you need, as a leader, to be able to inspect what you expect. You can't just give an assignment and then walk away. The assignment has to be given, instructions have to be clear, dates have to be clear, the essence of the assignment is clear, and when all of those things come together, then the leader just is checking up. And ideally, they're teaching their people to return and report, meaning that it starts here from the leader, who then gives direction to the executive team, who gives direction to a specific role player, and the assignments are all given out. Then the role player goes and completes the assignment and reports back to the executive level, and then finally to the CEO. And the CEO ultimately has responsibility to make sure it happens. So if it falters, it's on me. It's not on them. It's on me. And that's a very important role of leadership. I never blame people down in the organization. I blame myself. If something didn't happen correctly, I didn't set up the structure to make it happen appropriately, because I would have given the assignment. I know the assignment. I know when it's due. When it's due, if the report didn't come back, then I'm going to go check. That means they're going to go check, and so I'm going to find out where we're at, and we're going to keep the organization moving forward. So we can see the process here. We have the leader, goes to the manager, goes to the associate does it, reports back to the manager, who reports back to the leader. All right, so this is a really important lesson right here. Now, I could tell you long stories about this, but I'll tell one brief one. In a situation where one of my associates was asked to teach, and he was asked at very short notice, and he didn't have the material and said he didn't have the material. The professor then said, well, you just use mine. And so he did, but there was another partner in the material, and when the partner came in, so these people wrote a leadership book. They were the author of a leadership book, and so one of the authors comes into the room, sees my friend teaching his material, and jumps to the conclusion, and in front of the whole class says, well, at least you could use your own material. Now, how do you think that he felt? He was doing a favor, and he had gotten permission ahead of time, but the person who had written the material didn't take the time to follow his own rules. So think about this whenever bad things happen in the organization. You're going to plan before you act. You're going to learn before you plan. And when things take an unexpected negative turn, you're going to step back and you're going to learn even more. And then before letting one cross word or false word come out of your mouth, so you spoil your chance for success. This really is a great teaching tool, but you can see how hard it is sometimes to follow it. All right, these are 5 C's that I don't have time to really spend, and I'll leave this presentation behind for you. But when you think about being a great leader, here are 5 principles that will help you to become a better leader. Think of compassion, and in the real world, in a company, what would that mean? Think of courage in a real world situation where tough decisions have to be made, how that would act out. Think of your own personal competence, because as a leader, you must be competent. If you are not, you will have a hard time attracting the talent that you want. So if you're less competent than you would like to be, then you seek to obtain the competence that will allow you to be the expert in the room. Communication is incredibly important, and as I always say, poor communication indeed is the root of all evil. In corporations, in marriages, in families, in anything you can think of, poor communication is problematic. And then commitment, the leader does whatever it takes. I always think about the chicken or the pig regarding breakfast, right? So the chicken participates, but the pig is committed. All right, the law of integrity. How can we honor our word? Now, I want you just to look at these companies right here. What do they all strike out? Enron, WorldCom, Tyco, Countrywide, Theranos, Alliance Health. I could go on, but there are a few. Integrity matters. It matters more than anything to me in running companies, and it should matter to you. And if you just don't know enough about those companies, go look up. You'll see what I'm talking about. Now I'm going to talk about vision for a minute. The leader has to set a vision inside of the company. So I'm just going to let this speak for itself for a minute.
The vision doesn't come from me as the CEO. Sure, I have input into the vision, but so does everybody else. It's a shared vision among the leadership team. People will buy into something that they help create. Now, when you're creating a vision, not a lot of startups have vision statements. And it's vital to keep alignment as you scale. Our vision statement's right up front as you walk in the building. And the vision statement can be anything you want. Where do you want to be in 2 years? use your imagination. Paint a picture. Whatever that picture is, imagine it in as much detail as possible. Get group buy-in that, hey, here is where we can get as a leadership team. Once you have that buy-in, you build that vision, write it down. Now you're going to figure out, how do we reach that vision? It might seem bold at first, like, wow, that's a long way off. How do we do that? What you do is we have a process for coming up with different strategic imperatives. We had 6 strategic imperatives in our playbook, and every single person agreed that if we do all 6 of these strategic imperatives, that, hey, we've got to our vision. We did it. And the strategic imperatives are kind of high level, but lower level than the vision statement. And we take strategic objectives, and each strategic imperative is broken out into probably 3 or 4 strategic objectives. Everybody agrees that the strategic imperative is met once you've done the objectives. Last thing is you just do tasks. Each strategic objective has a set of tasks associated with it, with an owner, with a due date. At the end of the day, you have all the tasks necessary over the next 2 years. These are high-level tasks. This isn't a function of micromanagement. This is high-level stuff. And a leader owns the task with a due date. Now you have a self-managing system that gets you to your vision. Every week in my weekly staff meeting, I mean, a 5-year-old could manage the business once you set this up, because it's red light, yellow light, green light on each task. So you know the executives you have that are just killing it. They're superstars, green light every single time. And you know the ones that aren't pulling their weight. And it's not just me, it's them, and it's all of their peers.
So one of the things I'd like to highlight here is this hierarchy of having a vision, and in order to keep alignment, we have these strategic imperatives, maybe 5 or 6. And underneath each imperative, we have these objectives, and underneath the objectives, we have tasks. And so they all cascade up. And when we've achieved all of those, we've achieved our vision. When I was at Brigham Young, I established a vision statement that said, we lead in developing successful, I have 2 of them. I'm going to tell you the transition. To be the global leader in successful campus-inspired entrepreneurial ventures. And we set up a whole framework just like this, and there is little doubt that we actually achieved that, because I-15 is aligned with the companies that started out of our center. Now, I left for a brief time to go and start another company. And when I came back, I realized that maybe I hadn't achieved everything that I was looking for, because a lot of these companies, when they became wildly successful, they sort of lost their way when it came to their families or other things that might be important. And to me, it wasn't about making just a bunch of rich people. It was about building rich people or wealthy people that had character, that wanted to give back, that still valued their family and their faith, and so on and so forth. So visions are very important. Then another thing is planning and strategy. So again, without time, I'm going to let you think about these, but we have the vision. Everybody knows what a SWOT analysis is. Many people don't identify bottlenecks and then problem solve and get through the bottleneck. Great leaders lead their teams through that. And then we identify the plan, the task owners, and so forth, so that everybody knows who's responsible and who's accountable. And finally, these rolling 90-day BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. These are some things that I think are really important. I like to have 90 days that are set up, so that then I go accomplish the next 30 days, and I add another 30 days worth. And I keep, just keep the ball moving down the track in that way. So I can't stress the importance of having these 90-day BHAGs, usually about 20. What are the top 20 things that if you got done, you would kill it? And so that means that you've got 6 or 7 things a month that you've got to be crushing out, and you're responsible for getting done. Once you finish those 6 or 7 things, then you're going to add 6 or 7 more, but they come behind. All right, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about these accountability sessions. Great leaders have one-on-ones with their key leaders. One-on-ones every week with their key leaders that help them to execute properly. I'm going to show you a little bit of a problem scenario that will help you think through this.
You can only give our guys 45 hours? That brings them to about there. Gentlemen, that's not acceptable.
Gene, we gotta talk about power here. Whoa, guys! Power is everything. Power is everything. What do you mean? Without it, they don't talk to us, they don't correct their trajectory, they don't turn the heat shield around. We gotta turn everything off. Now. They're not gonna make it to re-entry.
What do you mean, everything?
With everything on, the LEM draws 60 amps. At that rate, in 16 hours, the batteries are dead, not 45. And so's the crew. We gotta get them down to 12 amps.
How many?
You can't run a vacuum cleaner on 12 amps, John.
We gotta turn off. We have to turn off the radars, cabin heater, instrument displays, the guidance computer, the whole smash.
Whoa, guidance computer. What if they need to do another burn? Gene, they won't even know which way they're pointed.
The more time we talk down here, the more juice they waste up there. I've been looking at the data for the past hour.
That's the deal?
That's the deal.
Okay, John. Minute we finish the burn, we'll power down the LEM.
All right.
Now, in the meantime, we're gonna have a frozen command module up there. In a couple days, we're gonna have to power it up using nothing but the re-entry batteries.
Never been tried before.
Hell, we've never even simulated it before, Gene.
Well, we're gonna have to figure it out. I want people in our simulators, working re-entry scenarios. I want you guys to find every engineer who designed every switch, every circuit, every transistor, and every light bulb that's up there. Then I want you to talk to the guy in the assembly line who actually built the thing. Find out how to squeeze every amp out of both of these machines. I want this marked all the way back to Earth with time to spare. We never lost an American in space. We're sure as not going to lose one on my watch. Failure is not an option.
All right. I usually spend a long time actually walking through exactly what you saw there, but you saw a real leader taking, his team through real problems that did exist. This is historical, and how they actually solved those problems to make those astronauts come back alive. All right, so we have a problem-solving model here that I'm going to let you look at on your own time. I like the Rubik's Cube, because if any of you have ever tried that before to do it quickly, it's not the easiest. I've seen people that can do it, but that's what problem solving is like, and if you don't solve your problems, then you crash and burn. You don't make it back to Earth.
Gene, we have a situation brewing with the carbon dioxide.
We had a CO2 filter problem on the lunar module,
5 filters on the LEM.
which were meant for 2 guys for a day and a half. So I told the doc,
You're already up to 8 on the gauges. Anything over 15 and you get impaired judgment, blackouts, the beginnings of brain asphyxia.
What about the scrubbers on the command module?
They take square cartridges.
The ones on the LEM are round.
Tell me this isn't a government operation.
It just isn't a contingency we've remotely looked at.
Those CO2 levels are going to be getting toxic.
Well, I suggest you gentlemen invent a way to put a square peg in a round hole. Rapidly.
Okay, people, listen up. People upstairs handed us this one, and we gotta come through. We gotta find a way to make this fit into the hole for this, using nothing but that. Let's get it organized.
Okay, let's build a filter.
Better get some coffee going, too.
Now, doesn't that sound like company building? I got to do this with nothing but this. Whether you have the money or you don't, you still have to do it. Whether you have the team, you still have to do it. The problem-solving model forces you through scarcity to figure out how to do a lot with a little. That's why the private sector works so well, is because there are so many constraints, and constraints are your friend, and leaders lead their teams through the constraints. So the ultimate competitive advantage is your team. You have to have the right people on the bus, and you have to have them in the right seats, and only then can you start to chart the course of where it's going forward, where the bus is actually going to go. One of the things that you can take a look at, and I don't have time to once again really get into this, but you can see here's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. A great leader actually leads his team through these things and makes sure that these things exist inside of the company. notice at the end of the day what was added to Maslow's, and it was the Wi-Fi, because this generation can't live without it. That's more important than air. It's more important than food or health insurance or whatever else. But you have to understand these basic things. So one thing that I would like to tell you as leaders that happens all the time is that people join companies, but they leave managers. So you need to make sure that you have good leaders, good managers, because they will rip your good people away. So the great managers that you hire, they will implement those one-on-one sessions that we talked about. And again, there's a lot of more material around this. A great book that you can all read that helps you think about team. This really isn't so important. It's important at every stage of the company, but the larger you get, the more important it becomes. And I invite you to read this book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, by Patrick Lencioni. It's awesome. Now, one of the things that I'd like you to also understand is that leaders are not always right, and if you think you are, you're wrong. You're just not, and you need to have the humility to be able to help people realize in the organization that you don't think you know it all and that you need this team to help you. So one of the things, you can see the last thing, sometimes as leaders, we don't do a good job of helping people see the lion in the mirror. Instead, they see a pussycat. Believe me, you want your people seeing lions in the mirror. So treat them like that so that they feel that capable. Instead, we can use this model of stop, think, and lead. Now, finally, and I know this was quick from a fire hose, one of my favorite leaders of all time is George Washington. When you really study his life, as I have, you recognize that this country doesn't exist without one man, and that's George Washington. It never would have happened. And your company will not exist without you becoming like a George Washington. You should actually study what made him not the best strategist, but the best leader. And finally, I'm going to have you think about this as it relates to your organization.
He is the one.
You can learn to be the one inside of your organizations. Thank you. It's been wonderful being with you. Wish we had more time, but learn to lead, because there's nothing else that you will do in your organization that's more important than learning how to truly lead. Thank you.